Hello, good afternoon and welcome to the 23rd annual exhibit of Hydrogen Fuel Cell Technologies. We've been studying the market for some time. Year in, year out, we have guests on the stage, some who come back again and again. We're pleased that this is the case for this talk. I invite you all to sit down and have a drink. The drinks are on the house, and we'll be hosting three people from Connecticut. Aaron Knight, who does the economic development at the Connecticut Department of Economic and Community Development. Bart Kollen, next to me on the left. He is the Deputy Commissioner, also of the Connecticut Department of Economic and Community Development. Last but not least, Paul Aresta, to the far left. And he is at the Connecticut Center for Advanced Technology, the manager of the Energy Initiative. So please welcome with me my three guests. So, it's a large topic, and we almost have to rush through all the details because there's so many details. Let's start with you, Bart. Connecticut offers a business climate, which is very important for advanced energy technologies. Tell us about the Connecticut business climate there. What exactly is it like? How's the weather?
I wish the weather was better. Although we're here right this week, the weather's pretty good, so of course we're here in Europe. But maybe I should start with explaining where Connecticut is. If you look at the map of the United States, and most people know where New York City is, Connecticut is basically just right in the corner in the northeast, and therefore it has a very unique strategic location value. Within a day's drive or so from Connecticut, you have access to a third of the U.S. economy. You also have basically within that same distance about access to 2/3 of the Canadian economy as well. So that makes it a great location with a lot of activity nearby. The other reason that makes Connecticut a great place to do business is our talent pool. We have 40 universities. Most recognizable, I think, for people are Yale University in New Haven and the University of Connecticut. And they have green energy programs, engineering programs, green energy science programs as well. So a lot is being done to make sure that the talent pipeline for the businesses that ultimately drive this industry are doing well. That talent workforce, I think, shows in a couple of aspects. Connecticut is ranked in the United States as the sixth state with the sixth most engineers and scientists, PhDs, per 100,000 workers. We also have, we're ranked number 7 as far as the amount of patents per capita, and third specifically for hydrogen and fuel cell patents. So a very good quality workforce. The other thing not to underestimate, I would say, is the value of the quality of life in Connecticut. It's really a great place to live, raise a family. There's the shoreline that we have. There's the access to wildlife, skiing, and we get the benefit from being in between Boston and New York, 2-hour drive distance. So there's a lot of good things about living in Connecticut as well that's important, I think, from a business climate. And then finally, specifically for the hydrogen and fuel cell industry, there's a strong ecosystem. So there's a lot of support, mentoring on the smaller business side or supply chain companies. There's financial support for businesses. We'll talk about that a little bit more in a second. So there's a very strong ecosystem that probably is derived from the presence of very large advanced manufacturing companies in the state. A lot of people have heard of UTC and Pratt & Whitney that make the airplane engines, Sikorsky that makes the helicopters, and Electric Boat that makes submarines. And because of that talent pool and the whole ecosystem, the green energy sector gets the benefit from that presence as well.
So there's a critical mass of just about everything there in that,
yes,
that one small area. Aaron, there are already several major fuel cell manufacturers at work in Connecticut. Can you describe the numbers and the type of hydrogen and fuel cell activities that they've got going right now?
Sure. We have many original equipment manufacturers in the state of Connecticut, including Fuel Cell Energy, Doosan Fuel Cell America, Proton Onsite, which is a Nel company, We also have Skyer, which is formerly Sustainable Innovations. They're currently commercializing a new product this year, and they changed their name, Precision Combustion.
Don't mean to interrupt you, Aaron, but I'm going to share my microphone with you because it's going to be a little easy.
No problem. Precision Combustion Inc. and U.S. Fuel Cell, which also is here. Many of those companies are actually exhibiting with us in this hall today. You can find Connecticut companies at the end of row E, actually near the Creative France pavilion. These companies create hydrogen fuel cell products in the with transportation applications, stationary power, and hydrogen generation, hydrogen production equipment. Overall, there's about 600 companies that work in the Connecticut supply chain in the fuel cell industry. These companies create over 1,000 jobs, which create about $600 million in revenue and investment in the state of Connecticut. The 1,000 jobs that we have are direct jobs, also represents about a third of all jobs in the country are in fuel cells, and they're based in our small little corner of the U.S. So there's a lot of activity working on, and a lot of different the major applications are represented in Connecticut as well.
Bore that back. Perhaps we can get another microphone on the stage if it's possible. Paul, people talk about things that are up and running, what's installed, and what's in the pipeline, what's planned. So perhaps you could address, the size of things that are running right now, what megawatt range, and what's in the pipeline for the near future.
Sure. With regards to fuel cells, there's approximately 85 megawatts of fuel cell capacity that's been installed or approved in the state of Connecticut, which is actually kind of high considering the size of the state. That development has come across because of the supportive policies that the state of Connecticut has for fuel cell technology. They have a public benefits fund, renewable portfolio standards, net metering, which is very important. They also have production incentives through a low emission renewable energy credit program. So all of those things have combined to really foster the development and use of fuel technology in the state. On the hydrogen fueling side, the state's also been very supportive of hydrogen fuel for fuel cell electric vehicles. The state of Connecticut Department of Economic and Community Development has encouraged the development of fueling stations both in Wallingford and in Hartford, and the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection is currently undertaking a solicitation to help develop stations in other locations in the state. So it's a combination of strong supportive policies and mechanisms to implement those policies.
Whenever we talk about hydrogen fuel cell applications, we know that some of them are difficult for consumers to understand. So what really captures the eye, what's really sexy, of course, is transportation. So what's going on in the transportation sector, Aaron? What are they up to? Are their cars up and running? Do you have an infrastructure to fuel them?
Yeah, Paul actually covered some of the things that we have going on. There's a lot of support and government effort working with our partners at CCAT, and then also with the Hydrogen Fuel Cell Coalition working together to move those opportunities forward. Our agency, DECD, has been able to provide some grants, as well as our sister agency, DEEP, the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection, has also put some money into creating and getting hydrogen fueling stations up and running. The next few months, we'll have 2 that'll be commercial stations. And then by sometime next year, we'll have a 3rd commercial station in the southern portion of the state also up and running. There's also vehicle rebates and other opportunities that are available for people to take advantage of the new technology. The last thing I'll say is that we've also worked with, CCAT, our partners here have really worked well to create a roadmap of fleet deployment on where to invest the stations, where the optimal locations are, and then the number of vehicles that really would hit the road if we had 6 to 7 stations out there to support the need for fuel cells vehicles in our state of Connecticut.
When we talk about the automotive applications here, of course, we know that there's a lot of pressures to clean up the cities. The population density in Germany is just phenomenal by the comparison with me in Canada, particularly. Some people would say, how committed are you guys to the type of goals we've set in Europe? We have the Paris agreements. we have emission standards and so on. We know that that varies from state to state. So how would you address our skepticism? This is an unfair question, Bart. What sort of standards and what sort of goals, specifically in Connecticut, do you have that help support the fuel cell initiatives?
Yeah, it's kind of comes with the territory when you're part of a very large country. So I can really not speak on behalf of the entire United States of America, but I can assure you that particularly at the state level, there's a strong desire and strong commitment, and also strong ability to execute ultimately on policies to reduce the emissions. And so Connecticut is very proud that it's part of the 8-state MOU, together with California, Oregon, Massachusetts, New York, Rhode Island, Vermont. We've committed that by 2025 there will be 3.3 million zero-emission vehicles on the road. And that as part of the way to get there, the government will, Connecticut state government will look at the ability to transform the fleet and buses into renewable or zero-emission vehicles as well. So I think that it shows a very strong commitment, and using that as a policy platform, some of the things that Aaron was talking about, of the companies that produce the automobiles and the companies that produce the fuel stations, all these pieces are starting to come together. So the momentum is building quite a bit. And then very recently this year, our governor, it's called Governor Malloy's Bill number 9, together with a legislator in the first quarter of this year, have proposed legislation that would require within the state of Connecticut by 2030 that 40% of the retail electricity sales comes from renewable energy sources. So a very strong local commitment, a very strong regional commitment to reduce the emissions.
Paul, Connecticut is part of a significant regional cluster. First of all, the notion of cluster is for me interesting. What exactly does that mean for you, and what does this regional cluster do?
Sure. So the regional cluster is a combination of original equipment manufacturers, supply chain companies, and those companies that help support the industry. There's a geographic concentration in New England, specifically in Connecticut is sort of the hub of this geographic concentration. Within this cluster, there's probably in excess of 1,200 supply chain companies that are part of the hydrogen and fuel cell industry. In terms of revenue and investment, approximately 1.4 billion is realized that comes from this industry annually. Over 600 million in labor revenue. So it's a large geographic cluster, but concentrated on hydrogen and fuel cell technology. And that cluster has been supported, the development of which has been supported by the United States Small Business Administration.
And I just wanted to add, this is part of the partnership between our Department of Economic and Community Development entity, but really the support that comes from the Connecticut Center of Advanced Technology, where we can rely on them to lead that initiative and to drive forward that cluster, whether at a state level or really the regional Northeast level. So they do great work pulling that all together and providing studies and papers and kind of documenting all the work that's been done in our state.
Yeah. Bart, you have a unique mission here, I think, because really you're in the position to offer assistance and resources and all sorts of networking in order to attract companies. So here's an area, a region in the world saying, come to us specifically for the fuel cell industry. So what resources for companies that want to establish themselves? They may be international players, they may be local players, they may be companies from Canada, but there they are. What are the resources and networking things that you provide to help them set up shop in Connecticut and do good business there?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that question, Brian. So I would say first and foremost, the incentives are the icing on the cake. Ultimately, you need to choose the state of Connecticut because of that strategic location and the workforce and the quality of life. But ultimately, from an incentive perspective, yeah, we do support businesses that are looking to expand and create activity in the state and create jobs. So we have loan and grant programs available, and there's great examples of being a co-investor in the expansion of a large stationary fuel cell manufacturing company. We were very proud to be a co-investor together with a car manufacturing company in Proton Onsite, Nel, in one of their first fueling station in the state, hydrogen fueling station. So beyond the loans and grants type of support, there's also a manufacturing innovation fund that provides funding for talent development. So there's an apprenticeship program where there's funding when people come out of school, or actually the funding while they do training on site, and then classroom training at the same time. There's also funding for the purchasing of equipment, a voucher grant program as well. Ultimately, there's different types of tax incentives available. So manufacturing companies in Connecticut that buy machinery and equipment are exempt from paying sales and use taxes over that equipment. But ultimately, I'd say a large portion of the support system is all the connectivity into that ecosystem, we might be able to facilitate the connection to a potential client. For example, a fuel cell engineer of the stationary company I was talking about called the other day and said, we know that this other manufacturing company would love to get in touch with them and talk about how we can reduce their cost of energy by using fuel cell energy. So being able to facilitate some of those introductions, it can be to the supply chain, it can be to clients, it can be to R&D, it can be to the universities and the talent pool. So there's a lot of ways. You'll find that Connecticut is a nice and small state where the lines are relatively short and we're very well connected in that entire ecosystem. So a great place to do business.
So things start moving quickly there.
Absolutely.
I suppose when I listen to all the advantages here, we've talked about the number of universities, the highly educated population, its closeness to a lot of industries, also cutting-edge industries, not simply industries, but cutting-edge high-tech industries. For me, it's just to put that all together, you have the critical mass, you have the intellect there, but technology acceptance is part of the game. How do you get people to accept new technologies, to install them, to buy that hydrogen fuel cell car? Not simply the initiatives, but people who think this is great. So this sounds like a bizarre question, but literally, a smart region understands some of these issues. Does that sound like a fair thing to say? I mean,
that we're a smart region? Yes, absolutely, Brian.
Yeah, no, but what I literally mean is that technology acceptance sometimes works quickly when people see the music, they hear it coming, there are changes afoot, and this technology is not simply a potential R&D job. This is the future of energy supply and energy storage. So do you think that there's, again, a certain advantage to having that concentration of highly educated people, universities, and then also a government that stands behind these policies? Aaron?
Yeah, I'll just add, I mean, you think you covered it. We're the third most educated state, as far as advanced degrees. That's a metric that we are happy to share. And I think what comes from that level of education, you also have early adopters, people who are interested in new technology. We have a comprehensive energy plan, so there's people who care about their carbon footprint and things in the state of Connecticut. You'll see there are charging stations for electric vehicles, popping up more and more. Bart, we talked about your friend who has a Tesla, and the fact that he loves having that opportunity. So you definitely see that early adoption and the understanding of the technology helping to move that forward. One of the things I think is that we know we make this equipment in the state, so there's additional support for if we support this technology and use this technology, we have the added benefit that there are jobs created by the manufacturers who create this technology as well. And that's one of the things we're really proud of having that ecosystem and workforce in the state as well.
Yeah, and maybe two other things that come to my mind when you introduce this topic is embracing that this technology is the technology of the future by imagining a world that is full of, for example, the 3.30 emission vehicles. Just wrapping your mind around, imagine that you drive around the state and you see all these other cars. It's just a matter of how do we get there, not are we going to get there, or what are the obstacles. Let's talk about how we got there in the end, and some of that starts with the talented workforce, but at a very young age. And so engaging children and middle school kids and inviting them to come see with their own eyes and maybe with their own hands, get exposed to some of the technologies and getting them excited to be part of that industry as well as part of what Connecticut is very active in.
And even before it's on all the streets, it's an export commodity.
Yes.
Wherever it's being sold. Well, we've learned there's a number of reasons to go to Connecticut. The skiing, the lifestyle, closeness to the ocean, concentration of intelligent people, available resources for the fuel cell industry. This is always a thrill to talk to you people because it is a place where things are booming and they'll continue to do so, I'm sure. I hope you come back next year.
Hope so.
And tell us how things are going. I've been talking to Aaron Knight in the middle here, who's Economic Development at the Connecticut Department of Economic and Community Development. From the same organization, Bart Kollen, Deputy Commissioner. And last but not least, Paul Aresta, who's manager of the Energy Initiative at the Connecticut Center for Advanced Technology. It's been a thrill to have you guys here. Hope to see you back here next year.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank
Please
you.
come visit us in our booth.
Oh,
Thank you.
yes. The booth is E80, just
E80.
around the corner here. Go and talk to them in the booth. They have more information there, and they love answering questions.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you. So, and thank you. We'll be continuing very shortly. Next up on the stage is Dr. Torsten Derit, who is from Centroplast Engineering Plastics, and they'll be talking about extruded large dimension bipolar plates for fuel cells and batteries. Stay tuned. The drinks are on the house. They're free, and they'll be coming to you shortly.